This is Warren Vander Hill interviewing Dr. Gil Bloom, Emeritus Professor of Theater, for the Ball State History Project, October 25, 2004. Gil, I want to thank you for agreeing to help me with my project. And I'd like you to begin by telling me a little bit about your background, where you're from, your college and graduate school experiences, and essentially wander around a bit, perhaps in monologue style, and get me from the beginning to Ball State.
Okay. Born and raised in Rochester, New York. Family interested in the arts. My dad was a choir director. My mother is a graduate of Eastman School of Music and has a double degree in music and English, as a matter of fact. So I was exposed to the arts early, exposed to theater and music. After high school, went to College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. I spent my 4 years there, doing suddenly a lot of theater, in particularly the last 2 years. I think I did 12 shows in 2 years. And then spent the better part of the year in a professional theater as a technician and actor, technician primarily. Then went in the military service, stationed overseas in Germany for a year and a half, came back and went to graduate school at the University of Iowa, and eventually got my master's and my PhD at Iowa.
Okay.
At the end of that, started looking for a place to work, and wound up here.
Okay. When you made the decision to come to Ball State, did you have other, what I call, viable academic options? Did you choose Ball State from among 1 or 2 or 3 other possibilities?
Yeah, there were a couple of other places that I was looking at. This seemed to be the most inviting in terms of being able to teach courses that I was interested in. Very small theater program, obviously, at that point in time. I came in '62. Came into the English department at that point. Those were the days when we had 9 departments, and,
right.
And the world was under English.
Before the breakup.
Before the
it's like Central Europe.
Before the vast division.
Yeah, right.
And then the department breakups were kind of wild. I think I've worked for departments. I had never changed what I was doing, but I think I worked under 7 different department titles. Because when we first broke up, we had speech and theater and journalism and radio, television, and speech science, all in one department.
I didn't know that journalism was in there.
Yeah, and then gradually, one by one, they broke away, as happened in other areas. Yeah. But I had the same office for 42 years, which made it interesting moving out.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised what you keep for some strange reason.
No, that's for sure. I've still got all my old grade books going back to the early 1960s.
Yeah. I finally disposed of those, but yeah, I had them all the way back to early 60s. But I came here because I could teach in theater. There were only 3 of us at that point teaching theater courses. So by now we're up to, I don't know, 16, 18, 20 in that department.
Were they all full-time faculty members? You didn't have the part-timers in those days?
No, we didn't have part-timers, although my teaching assignment was split between speech and theater. And that was another attractive thing, because I did have a fair amount of speech background as well. And my wife did too. And then once the splits began to arrive and the theater area grew, then I worked more into the theater area.
Okay, you came here to be a brand spanking new young faculty member, assistant professor, pre-tenure. What were your expectations? What a faculty member was supposed to be?
Well, first of all, my expectations were to be here for about 3 or 4 years and then move on. I remember talking with Jack Emmons and saying, well, we have people who stay here forever. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be one of those, because we didn't have a department. And
a common theme in this, I'll tell you.
And so, yeah, it was going to be 3 or 4 years, and then move on to someplace else where I could teach some more
Right.
involved courses in theater.
Yeah.
And then we got the breakup. We got our own major, which we didn't
Right.
have initially. We got the major in 1967, 66 or 67. And I was on the groundwork of building a major, developing the major, developing the coursework, and so forth. And I could design my own courses, basically, and teach what I wanted to teach in terms of what I thought kids majoring in theater ought to be exposed to.
We'll go back to expectations about, I guess what I'm after here is the role of the faculty members. What did you feel you were expected to do? I mean, was there any notion at all that research entered into this equation where you certainly had teaching and service as major responsibilities?
Very little, very little. Oh yeah, if you had a paper for a convention, that'd be nice, but there was never any pressure in that direction as there was later on. No, it was get the classroom work done, do the committee work. No particular emphasis at all on the research side, at least from my standpoint.
As you reflect back now, why did you stay?
I stayed because I could build the program and I could do what I wanted to. My wife always says, yeah, we stayed here because Gil could teach what he wanted to teach, and if he went to a place like the University of Michigan, it'd be 15 years before he directed a show on their main stage, and he might never get to teach the courses that he was really interested in. So that was a large part of it, I think, being able to work the way I thought I ought to be working, and do the kinds of things that I was interested in doing.
Were you always in a position where you could pretty much do plays, and I'm talking now about directing, etc. You could do plays that you wanted to do? Was this pretty much your choice?
Yeah, within limits, yeah. We tried to service, and for a long time that really was the core of our play selection. We tried to service the university community, so we tried to, we talked at that point for some time afterwards about trying to represent all major theatrical periods over a 4-year period of time, so that a student who came to everything that we did, and certainly not all students did, but they had the opportunity to be exposed to the full range of theatrical activity, from the Greeks right up until the contemporary times, and hitting the high spots with the Shakespeare and the Restoration and everything else.
In what major ways did Ball State change while you were here? And I'm looking both from a departmental standpoint and a university standpoint. What are the big changes that occurred during Gil Bloom's career?
Well, from a departmental standpoint, it was growth. We started, as I said before, with no major. When we first got a major, we had perhaps 6 or 8 kids, and we even had people in advising telling them no, they couldn't major in theater. There was no such thing. Well, there was finally on the books, but people over there didn't even recognize it at that point. But we gradually grew. We added faculty slowly. We were always overworked, but that's true, I think, all across the campus at that point. The student body was growing. It was, around 6,000 when I came. And that's now tripled, or approximately tripled. And so we had more people interested in the theater. The reputation, I think, of the department grew. And that was the major thing, I think, in terms of the department. We got better kids. We were able to do more. We started doing, when I first came, we did 1 show a quarter. So we were on a quarter system. 1 show a quarter, and that was it. And then students went to do other things, and we got what we called then the flexible theater program going. which wound up being the studio theater program in Fred Strada. And that provided more places for the kids to work, and they needed more than one show to do, because we began to get more students, and they wanted to do stuff. And so that program began to develop, and then as we got more faculty members and were able to do more shows without killing ourselves, then the production program expanded, as well as the curricular offerings. So it was a matter of growth, and we're still in that growth pattern.
Do you think the students are a lot better today than when you came here?
Oh, no question.
Oh. In what way?
Two ways, I think. I think they're brighter. We've got presidential scholars, we've got Wagner scholars in our program. Not all of them. Not all of them a lot brighter. But so we get the full range.
Yeah. But I mean, you really notice that as a professor.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no question about it. And there's more talent.
Okay.
There's more talent.
How about changes in the larger institution during the time you were here? What changes had an impact on you, if any?
Oh dear, that's a tough question, because we operated so much in our own little shell, I think.
Well, you touched on one, and that is, you mentioned quarter system. I mean, did the change from quarters to semesters have any impact on what you were doing?
I think not seriously.
Okay.
We simply divided the course material differently, I think, but we kept the production program increasing. The one advantage of it, I think that immediately came to the surface, was that we had students for a longer period of time in a particular training situation. We had a stagecraft class, for example. Under quarters, we started with green kids 3 times a year, and they're the ones who were building the sets. Okay, by the time we get them to where they know how to build a set, they're gone, and we started afresh on the quarter system. Well, now we've got them for 5, 6, 7 more weeks, and we can do more complex things because they're ready to tackle more complex things. And we don't have to stand over them saying, no, this is the end of the hammer you use. And so they could do more on their own. With growth, too, we had, particularly while we were still with speech, we had graduate assistants, and so we had graduate assistants in the shop that could help supervise and do other things along the way, so that we had kind of a supervisory cadre along the way, and that helped too. Excuse me. But we were pretty much stuck in our own little corner, and most of the changes university-wide, I think, really didn't impact us all that much. Yeah, we went to a different collegiate system, and of course that changed partway through finally the College of Fine Arts establishment 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, mid-'80s.
Yeah. And that obviously made some differences, because now we were, in terms of collegiate activity, we were working with people that knew how we worked, and we knew how they worked in terms of the arts, which was different certainly from people who were in history or in English and have no vague idea of the creative process that we had to go through. Still have the idea that many of the students have, that, oh yeah, you pick a show and you hand the scripts to the kids, and 3 days later it's all done.
Yeah,
It's ready for viewing. So that, I think, made some changes in the way we were able to operate, could tell our story academically, in terms of research, in terms of what we were doing. We at least had ears that were open instead of people who said, yeah, well, that's not the way we do it. Well, no, we know it's not the way you do it. But we have to work this way. And a lot of people don't understand that kind of difference.
Well, I think about that because what you've talked about really represents a view held by a number of faculty, and that is many of these macro changes that are near and dear to the hearts of administrators really don't have much influence on the ground, as it were. That they really don't filter down and have an awful lot to do with the daily life of the faculty.
No, I think that's absolutely true. Yeah, you get changes in personnel and they want to go in different directions, that's fine. You get changes in organization, and that simply means there's a different person up the line that you have to check with on something or other. And even there, we're still talking about department heads as opposed to the average guy meeting in the classroom.
Yeah. Okay. We talked before we began the tape a little bit about the macro change in personnel policies that took place from the early to the mid-1980s, specifically changes in standards for attaining tenure, promotion to associate and full professor, the introduction of merit pay components and things like that. And by the time those changes occurred, you certainly were tenured and were a full professor. But did those kinds of changes in the lives of colleagues have a lot of impact on your life as a faculty member?
Yeah, because it meant in some respects that fellow faculty members who were now under the pressure to publish, for example, didn't have as much time to do some of the other things that previously they might have done. So, well, yeah, I'd like to be able to help you out painting the set this afternoon, but I've got a paper I've got to finish because it's got to get sent into so-and-so. And so there was impact on us from what was demanded of others. I never had that particular pressure as I moved through the process up the scale.
Nor did I.
When I came, it was pretty much a matter of longevity.
Right.
Yeah, you get your degrees and you stay for X number of years and you get to be an associate professor.
As our colleague Whitney Gordon used to say, you would attain tenure and become a full professor as long as you weren't an axe murderer.
Yeah, well, yeah. You didn't rock too many boats along the way. You were all right.
Well, very eloquently put. Who are some of the people, either here or elsewhere, who had a special impact on you during your long, distinguished career?
Oh, boy. If we're talking about people I studied with,
sure.
Oscar Brockett, obviously. Taught the first graduate course I walked into, as a matter of fact. It was an hour-and-a-half session. My wife loves to tell the story. We had just moved into Iowa City. We went totally unpacked, and I came home from meeting that first class. I was one of 3 master's candidates in a class of about 25. And Oscar was an instructor in the classroom who started with the bell and ended with the bell. And it was jam-packed, and you were taking notes as fast as you could, and hoping you didn't miss too much while you were writing one thing, miss something else. And I went home and said, have you finished unpacking yet? And she said, well, no. And I said, well, hang on, I'm not sure we're going to be able to stay here. I had been out for a couple of years, 3 years actually. And so I'd been away from the academic situation, and this was a real shift for me. But he is at the top of the line in terms of my particular area, which is theater history. And
How do you spell his last name?
Brockett.
Okay, Oscar Brockett.
And he is at the University of Texas at this
okay.
point. I had him at Iowa
Yeah.
and then taught at Indiana for a while.
Okay.
He is still teaching, incidentally. I got a letter from him when I did retire.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I still enjoy teaching and so on. It's probably because I don't know anything else that I want to do."
So this is a positive influence.
Oh, yeah. Because he was a detail person, and then wrote the textbook that I used in my theater history classes. Well, it's now in its 9th or 10th edition, I guess. And I have copies of all of them. Certainly a very strong influence. Somebody else that probably the average person wouldn't even think of, that's John Kuiper, Kuiper, who was in film. When I went to Iowa, I had an assistantship in radio television, and that was one of the reasons I was hired here, as a matter of fact. I was hired to teach, because I could teach radio television as well as theater, as well as speech, so I had 3 strings to the bow. Not that I ever taught any television, you understand, because Bill Tomlinson was not about to let go of any radio TV class.
Well, I know. Yeah.
And that was fine with me. I didn't care. I wasn't all that much into it. But John had been a professional photographer and had a great deal of creative energy and ability, and was able to draw that kind of thing out of his students. I thought, boy, here's somebody I can emulate. Here's somebody who knows how to get the creative juices flowing in somebody else.
Knows how to reach students.
Yeah, reach them, and not only reach them, but prod them and get them doing what they really want to do, and encourage them, and move them along in the process. John later became curator of film for the Library of Congress, and then headed up the Eastman House in my old hometown in Rochester.
Any people of influence here?
Uh,
For good or ill?
yeah. Well, Alan Huckleberry, certainly, who was our department chair once we split away from English. Was our chair for probably 20 years of that period, maybe a little bit more than that. Kind man, but a man who had his standards and made sure he adhered to those standards.
And very politically savvy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, great man.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful person to have as somebody to emulate along the way. With good standards.
Yeah.
Make sure you do things the right way. I suppose in terms of an influencer, he probably would be the strongest.
Could you tell me a little bit about areas you've been involved with, if any, in the community? Ball State talks a lot about town and gown and the part that faculty play in an incredibly vast array of things that go on in the community, and I wonder if there were any community activities that were particular favorites of yours.
Well, I have worked with Muncie Civic Theater off and on. Directed a few shows down there. Haven't been as involved with that as some other people have in the department. We've had people on the board at Civic. I've never got involved to that degree. Also did some work in the music line, because I've never dropped that interest. Sang in church choir and directed even for a period of time. Oddly enough, nobody knew I could, but I had my father to follow there because he was a director
Yeah.
for 30-some years
Yeah.
in the same church. Um, and we had an organist and choir director combination who left the church, and there was nobody to take it over.
Yeah.
And I stepped in and did it for about 6 months until I said, look, I can't do this because I've got a show to direct and I'm going into rehearsal, and I can't take a night off every week to run choir rehearsals. But I continued with that kind of thing. I've continued singing for a long time. I haven't done it in the last few years. I've done a few things with, a couple of things with Masterworks. Did some narration for a couple of things, the Christmas program, one other thing. So it's been mainly associated with the arts, rather than service organizations or things of that sort.
Right. People that have lunch on Tuesday.
Yeah,
right.
I never got into that whole thing.
Yeah, right. How about the university? I mean, were there particular service areas that you recall, again, either fondly or not so fondly, that were in service at the university level?
Well, like everybody else, I put in my years in committee work.
Right.
I think 1 or 2 years in the University Senate, but
Okay.
A lot of time in one of the councils, and I don't
Right.
know
Okay.
now which council it was. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But I served on special league committee for
Oh, okay.
about 6 years.
One of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
Ranking chemists.
Yeah.
With proposals about which you know little.
And some other things, and got involved in a couple of in some hearings and some personnel problem situations in terms of whether or not people were going to be dismissed, and had a few of those to deal with.
Those are the ones you don't remember too fondly.
No, not fondly. I remember
Yeah.
them, but not
Yeah,
fondly at
right.
all, because they were kind of sticky.
What's your perspective on the role of the faculty in the life of Ball State? We hear a lot these days about the need to change the governance system and all that kind of thing. And I'm looking here for the way that you view the role of the faculty in the decision-making process, beginning in the department and the college and on up ultimately to the board and things like that. Did the faculty have, in your view, a proper voice in decision-making while you were a member of the faculty?
I think certainly at the department level. I don't think there was ever any situation that I can remember, at least, where somebody said, no, this is the way it's going to be.
Right.
No, you have no input here. With Alan Huckleberry, and then with Ed Strada, and then with people since then.
Right.
It's always been a fairly congenial kind of situation. I think part of that grows out of the very business we're in.
Yeah.
The whole production business. You don't do any of that alone. You've got designers, you've got people working in a whole variety of areas,
Right.
and you have to learn how to work together and work with some give and take, and that carries over, I think, for us into the departmental organization and the departmental decision making. So it's always been at that level, certainly there we had a voice. At the collegiate level, I think we did not have much of a voice until we had the arts college established. We were in sciences and humanities with 20 other departments, and we were the smallest.
Yeah. Right.
So we had no clout. There were no other artistic groups in the college. We really didn't have much voice. How much voice the faculty as a whole had on the operation of that college, I'm not at all sure. when we got to College of Fine Arts, I think we had some input. John Urias was the first team. Was a little less open, I think, to faculty ideas. He came in knowing what he wanted to do with the college. It wasn't that he wouldn't listen to anybody, but I think 90% of the time his mind was made up before anybody voiced any opinions. I think Margaret was a little more open. And I think Dr. Von now is pretty open too.
Yeah. I would agree with that assessment. Having had something to do with all three.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is a question I've always wanted to ask somebody in your area of expertise. When you direct a play, how does a set get designed? How much of a meeting of the minds is there between someone like you directing a play and someone like Kip Shaw? How does that creative process evolve?
It depends on the designer you're working with. My general practice, and I think it works for most of us, at least in academic theater, is to say, okay, here's the script, designer, read the script. Okay. Now, I have some ideas, but I want to know what your ideas are. And so if it's Kip, I'll say, okay, what do you see as this set looking like?
Oh, okay.
And then it's a matter of, gee, I like this, but I really wish it were on the other side of the stage because I want the entrance. I want the entrance in the upright area, for example. My mind says the grouping of people on the stage ought to face in that direction when this person comes on for the impact on the audience. And it's not going to be as strong if it's on the other side. So can you move this? I love the entrance, but I want it over here. Can you move that over here and maybe get rid of this and put something else over here? And we go through a whole series of give and take meetings in terms of where particular units are when it comes to decorating the set, when it comes to color choices. Then we get other people involved.
But it's initially the person who's in charge of the set design and the director, before you get the other people involved.
Yeah, although very early on, you get the whole design team together. You get the costume people in, you get the lighting people in. Because there's no sense having an absolutely beautiful design that every costume that makes any sense is going to clash with, or that can't be eliminated. And I have worked, maybe it's because of the way I work, and Kip has been the one to assign student designers. I've worked with an awful lot of student designers. And there it's even more imperative that everybody gets together early on. Okay, this is the direction we're going with the show. Now, you come back with your ideas, you come back with your ideas, and we'll put them together, and we'll see what happens here, and then I begin to make some choices out of it.
Does this begin when you decided I would like to do this play?
Yeah. Or, as we've worked in more recent years, a committee gets together and says, here's the season.
Okay.
Usually with some input from people who are interested in directing. Okay, we have 9 directors on the staff. Give me a list of 2 or 3 shows that you would be interested in doing. Okay, and then they get together, and frequently there are directors on that committee. I was on it for a long period of time. You say, okay, what's going to make sense in terms of a balance? We don't want to do everything modern. We don't want to do everything out of the Elizabethan period. God help us.
Or the Greeks.
Okay, what can we do in terms of balance? What about demands on the scene shop? We can't do We can't do 6 main stage shows, all of which require 3 sets.
Right.
We don't have the personnel, we don't have the funds. Okay. So how are we going to solve that? We're going to have some small shows in there, so you have to have that kind of balance. You have to have balance in terms of musical and non-musical. You have to have balance in terms of size of cast. Particularly before we got as big as we are now, but 15, 20 years ago, we couldn't do a whole series of big cast shows. We were wearing the kids out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, kids couldn't
Yeah,
do
they're
it.
going from one show to another show to another show, and they're burned out by the end of the first term. And they're not passing their classes, and suddenly they're gone. you
Yeah,
know.
right, they aren't here.
So there are all kinds of considerations that have to go into building that bill. But once that bill is set, yes, it's okay.
Yeah.
Folks, let's get together.
Okay.
I set the basic direction for the show.
This is a dumb question, but do you set a schedule of plays for a year, what, a half year before? What's the time on this?
6 months to a year.
Okay. So now they would begin talking about next year?
We're talking about next year. We'll be talking about next year.
Okay. They'd be talking about 2005, 2006?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there's a tremendous amount of lead time that's necessary.
Yeah, that was one reason I asked. Far more than a lot of other majors. Maybe music could probably be the same thing, but I think certainly this is the case with theater, where you've got so many people involved.
You've got so
much,
many
yeah.
creative artists involved
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
process. And there is that whole give and take that has to take place before you even think about casting a show.
Yeah.
You know, that the whole idea of what the setting's going to be like and what the lighting's going to be like and what the costumes are going to be like that has to be settled basically before you get into the casting process, and you're talking about that at least probably 2 months before you open.
I've always wanted to ask you this. Who's your favorite playwright?
Oh boy.
Well, you can give me 1 or 2 or 3, but not 26.
Not 26. Certainly one of my favorites is Alan Ayckbourn.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay. Okay. Why?
Because he is so inventive.
Okay.
I've done 3 or 4 of his shows. He has some kind of gimmick that's interesting in every show. I remember one show that I did of his. Everything takes place in 3 bedrooms, side by side by side on stage. All of the action is in 3 separate bedrooms, but you see it all
Yeah, right.
evolving. There's a party downstairs in one of these places, but all of the action is between couples and sometimes triangles in a bedroom. He's got another show that where everything's on the same level, but it's a 3-story building that they're in. Another show where one of my favorite scenes. There's a scene in which one couple is invited to dinner at 2 separate houses on 2 consecutive nights, and the action works as though it's at the same time. So there's an X-shaped table with the host and hostess at the end of each of these X arms.
Yeah.
And then the visiting couple is in the middle, so they can swivel back and forth to deal with whichever couple is hosting at that particular moment in the script. But it switches back and forth through the show, through that particular scene. And it's hysterical. And he comes up with these marvelous gimmicks. A show of his I've always wanted to do, it's got to be hell on wheels for the actors and actresses. There is a standard first act, but then there are choices to be made. In one night they do Act 2, Scene 1, and the next time they may do Act 2, Scene 3. And the action is different. And the same thing happens in the third act. So I don't know how you rehearse this thing, you know.
To say nothing of the demands on the cast.
Yeah, oh, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Any others?
I'm a great admirer of Shaw.
Oh, okay.
Love Shaw.
Yeah.
My favorite play of all time, I guess, is St. John.
Oh, okay.
Probably because I was in a production of it in college, which I enjoyed tremendously. But I love Shaw. First show I did on this campus was a Shaw. Did camp. Who else? Not a huge fan of Miller, not a huge fan of Williams.
Well, you seem drawn a lot to British theater, I've noticed over the years.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of it is, part of it's because of my background. Part of it's because the Brits at this point do better theater than anybody else.
Still?
Still, yeah. I don't know. I am drawn to comedy more than serious shows, although I love doing a good serious show.
I was thinking of that in the context of a wonderful cover piece, front page piece in yesterday's New York Times book review, where they actually got Woody Allen to write about George S. Kaufman. And some of George F. Kaufman's stuff happened to be plays that I read when I was in prep school, Mannequin at Dinner and things like that. And I always liked Kaufman, but never knew much about his life. And of course, Woody Allen writes about it almost in the context of parallel lives with Woody Allen growing up as a Jewish kid in Brooklyn and George Kaufman's life. And you should read this. It's written in a very humorous Woody Allen way about George Kaufman as one of his great role models. I mean, I was thinking about those kinds of plays that were done in the 1930s.
Well, I love the 30s comedies.
Yeah, me too.
I love the Kaufman on hard stuff.
Yeah, right.
And again, I've done a couple of those.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you one last question. This is the big question of the community and the university, and that is, I've asked each person involved in this topic if he or she would comment a little bit about how you see the relationship between town and town, how you see the relationship between the university and the community that we, over our years at Ball State, have certainly heard a great deal about. I mean, do you think it's better now, worse now? Perhaps some reasons why you think it has changed, if indeed it has. Or perhaps you don't pay any attention to it.
I think it's better than it was.
Okay.
We have more people doing more things in the community.
Okay.
Again, my experience is mostly in the arts, but I think of the Art Center downtown, and all that's going on there. Headed by, supported frequently by faculty from the university.
Well, you often hear comments from people on the town side of this equation that the university, quote, doesn't do enough for the community, end quote. In your long career here, do you think that is a valid criticism?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think we don't do as much as we could. I don't think we go into the schools as much as we should.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
No, the architecture certainly gets down and does some things. I'm not aware of certainly everything that's going on. I'm sure there are areas that people could say, well, we do this, and nobody ever hears about it. And I think there's a lot of that does go on.
I guarantee you that's true. There was a time, I don't know, halfway, 2/3 of the way through John Williams' long presidency, where John got me to get the deans, to get the chairs, to get the faculty, probably participated in this, to write down everything they had done for the previous 6 months or academic year. And when all of those things came from the departments, the deans, over to me, I could not believe. I mean, it was 20-some-odd pages, if not more, of things people were doing. And then John said, well, that's exactly what I told, I don't even know who the mayor was then, that we're doing all these things. And I think Worthen's view was that it was something that wasn't appreciated. And indeed, as you pointed out, a lot of it was never mentioned, never recorded. Done.
Yeah, it's done, and nobody ever hears about it.
Right. But you do think it's better?
Yeah, I really do. I don't know that the political climate is any better than it was,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
became.
30, 40 years ago.
Yeah,
But I think we are more involved.
okay. Anything else you want to add? Any final Gil Bloom reflections on a long and wonderful career as a member of the faculty?
Well, some things never change.
Yeah.
I thought coming in, okay, where am I going to park?
That's usually one of the first things I ask people. I say, well, if you come to my office, I'd really appreciate it if you could come here, or we could meet at some neutral site and have coffee or whatever, although this is a little more private. But if you come on campus, do you have a place to park? And I find that most Emeriti are pretty inventive in doing something like that.
I remember when I first came here, of course, there was the big parking lot right outside our building,
Right,
because
right.
that's before half the campus was built.
Yeah.
And there was a little faculty lot that
Right.
was, a stone's throw and not a very long stone's throw from my office.
Right.
Came down that Woodworth Drive, and it was that little, probably held 20, 25 cars. And now, this morning, I parked on the other end of campus and took the shuttle in.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, that's always safe.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for participating in my project.
Well, I'm
really
happy to do it.
appreciate
I didn't know that I've illuminated
You
anything
have,
along the
yeah.
way, but...
It's the kind of thing that with all the people I've interviewed, there's always at least a question or two or three that I've always wanted to ask this person, and so I managed to fit them in. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome, sir.